Okay guys, I am going to teach you how to read a face clock. To read a clock there is 5 terms that you need to know, and I'll discuss the first one, which is the big hand. This here is the big hand. It is the longest hand, even though it's called the big hand. The second term is the little hand. The little hand is the short hand. The next term is the second hand, which on this clock I did not put it, but it goes right here, and it is the fastest hand that goes all the way around. And for the most part, we're not going to use that at all because it will distract you from learning how to read a clock. Now the first thing you need to know is be able to count by fives. I put this on the board here. If you don't know how to count by fives, it goes 5, 10, 15, 20, and you need to be able to count up to 55. And there should have been a 0 here because you actually start counting with 0 and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now the last term you need to know is tick mark. Now the tick mark is these here little marks in between the numbers. You'll notice there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 ends up on the 1. Now that I have went through all the terms and what you need to know, the first thing is the big hand. The big hand points to the tick marks. Even though it's pointing to the 12 right now, it is a tick mark on the clock. Now the little hand points to the numbers on the clock. Even though these are a little bit darker and bigger tick marks, it is pointing to the numbers on the clock. Now to read a clock, there's 2 questions you have to ask. The first question is, what is the little hand pointing to? The reason I'm starting with the little hand is because women and children are first, so I'm going to start with the little hand. To explain what the little hand is pointing to, it is the area from the 1 all the way to almost touching the 2. So anywhere on this clock, if it's this area here, all the way to almost touching the 5. And the good indication to find out where it is pointing to, as this is pointing, if I move this over to where it's roughly halfway in the middle, you will notice that on a clock, the big hand will be actually pointing straight down, because the big hand is actually moving at the same distance in between this here as the big hand moves all the way around the clock. So right now it's halfway through the 1 and the 2. It's halfway, the big hand is halfway around the clock. So if I move it to almost to here, I should have put it right here. If the little hand is pointing right here, the big hand will actually be all the way almost touching the 12. So when you look at it, right now it's still in the 1 area. Until it touches the 12, then it is actually pointing to the 2. The second question is, how many tick marks is the big hand pointing to? Alright, now we are going to put 2 hands on this clock and we're going to be able to read it. First thing is, I am going to put the big hand right here. And being the big hand is almost all the way around the clock, we remember that the big hand helps point where it is on between the numbers. So I will just put the little hand about right here, because here's the 6 and the 7, and it's more than halfway because the big hand is there. So let's look at this here. We always start with the little kids first, and looking at this here, it is pointing to the 6, not the 7, because it is between the 6 and the 7. So we go with the 6. First number is 6. And now the second thing we have to do is how many tick marks is the big hand pointing to. And if we know how to count by fives, it's way easier. But if we have to count by ones, you got to count every one of those tick marks. But we can go 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 46, 47, 48. So we got 6:48. That is the time on our clock right here. All right, let's do another one. Let's take the little hand this time and put it about right here. So that looks like it's about halfway between the 1 and the 2. So that means the big hand should be about halfway around the clock, so it's about halfway here. So these hands line up together on a real clock. Most teachers will say, well, it's pointing to the 1, and they'll move the big hand but not progress the other hand according to the way a real clock works. So I'm making it work just like a real clock. So let's look at the little hand, because we always do the first question. What is the little hand pointing to? Well, it definitely is pointing to the 1, because it's halfway between the whole circle here. So the first number is 1, and the second number, or the second time, is how many tick marks is the big hand pointing to? 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. So it is 1:30. Seems very simple. Now I'm going to play the video at the very beginning of the clock that was moving, and I want you to notice how the big hand moves all the way around one time, and the little hand only moves from one number to the next number. And notice how they both coincide about halfway through, and the other one is halfway through.